Hello and welcome to today's webinar, learning how WP-CLI can make your life easier. My name is Christo Panjarov and I am manager of WordPress initiatives at SiteGround. And our guest today is Alain Schlesser. Hello, Alain.
Hello.
Probably most of you who follow what's happening in the WordPress world have at least heard about WP-CLI and the fact that Alain has been the main person behind the project going forward for the past few years. So would you say a few words more about yourself first?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I've been freelancing in web development for a few years now. I worked in government, in Luxembourgish government before, and I've been maintaining WP-CLI for a bit more than 2 years now. And it has been one of my passion projects, basically, because it's just such an awesome tool that helps lots and lots of people and is a critical piece of architecture. So that's basically half of my time is by now I spend on WP-CLI and maintaining it, on creating relationships with partners, on marketing it, and being on contributor days and so on. And the other half, I do freelance development work. I'm specialized in a bit projects on the complex side of things, mainly helping people that are stuck with a WordPress site that has grown out of proportion and helping them get everything back into shape again so that they can better maintain their site and have it run more reliably.
That's great. Hopefully more people will get their sites growing out of proportion soon. Let's start with the very beginning. What is WP-CLI? What does CLI stand for, and what is it? What's this awesome thing that we'll be talking about today?
Yeah, so WP-CLI is a command line interface to WordPress. That means it allows you to control WordPress by typing commands. And that sounds a bit awkward at first if you're not used to using the command line. But basically, it provides a streamlined way of interacting with your site in such a way that you can scale operations much more easily and automate a lot of the steps that you need to do repeatedly. So whenever you can find a given command that does something, you can just put it into a script file, and then you have a shortcut to run it. You can run it automatically inside of a background process or whatever you can fancy. So the WP-CLI is not only the way to run WordPress through the command line, but it does a lot of magic behind the scenes to make the entire inner workings of WordPress more streamlined, because WordPress has just grown organically. And if you look at the documentation for posts, for example, functions are named in this way and work in this way. For comments, it's a different way. For taxonomies, it's yet another way. And so WP-CLI basically tries to provide streamlined CRUD interfaces. So interfaces that just let you manage the building blocks of WordPress in a streamlined and efficient way.
So we have WP-CLI pre-installed on all SiteGround servers, but since we're starting from the very beginning, can you tell us more? What are the requirements? How do you start using CLI if you don't have it pre-installed?
So if you don't have WP-CLI pre-installed, there's an installing section on the website that details the different ways you can install it. The easiest one is to download the for archive. For archives are specific, special PHP archives that are executable. And as soon as you put this into a location on your machine or on a server that is in your path, meaning that the system knows where to find it if you try to code, then it's ready to use. So it's just a single binary file in that case. And as long as the system can find it and it's executable, you can just type its name to run it. So usually when I start working on the server, when it's not a server that comes pre-configured with WP-CLI like ones from SiteGround, I usually create a bin folder in my home directory of the user I'm logging into the server. Make sure that that bin folder, bin is short for binary. It's just a convention used in Linux systems. I make sure that that bin folder is in the path, and then download a version of WP-CLI into that bin folder. I then rename it, whatever name it had while downloading, I rename it into WP, and then I'm good to go. And then you can just use it immediately. There's no additional installation step you need or so. And as soon as you execute it from within a folder that contains a WordPress site, even if it's a subfolder like the WP content folder, it will recognize the specific site you're in and automatically let you manage that specific site.
So it's really useful for people who are, even for people who are using local environment to develop their website, to build something new, to try out, to have the WP-CLI. It would help them a lot in terms of troubleshooting and quickly executing stuff, right?
Yes.
Let's show our viewers something already, because we've been talking for 5 minutes without showing them a single line of code. So let's. What's the first thing you want to show us?
Yeah, so I'll share my screen, and basically what I will do is we set up a SiteGround server to run tests on now, and I will now share my screen and connect to that server and get started with using WP-CLI to get access to the server and slowly get control of it and mirror that server on my local machine. So I'm now trying to share my screen. Let's see how successful I am with that. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So first of all, so Risto had already set up a server that I can connect to. So this is the specific server that I will use. And basically, when I now log onto that server, now I'm connected through SSH. So SSH is a secure shell. This means I connected to this server through the use of a key that is configured on the server so that I'm authenticated. And now when I run operations, I'm inside of that remote server. And first of all, let's find out whether WP-CLI is installed. So I do WP-CLI info, and I can see that the system knows WP-CLI. It already has it pre-installed. It comes in version 2.20, which is the most recent stable version. So that's good. If it would be an old version, I could easily update it through an update command. Here in this case, it's not writable because SiteGround is managing that instance and keeping it up to date. But if this would now be running on your own local machine, for example, you could easily just automatically update it through that approach. So now we're looking for the site on this machine, and we're finding a site in here. So here you can see, right, I'll do a bit of cleanup. Here you can see that we have an existing WordPress site that is already running some things. So if I do, for example, WP plugin list, I can see what plugins are installed. If I do a WP theme list, I can see what themes are installed. So you can see that there are a few plugins. There's already WooCommerce installed. there's the storefront theme active. And in this way, I can already get a sense of what is happening on this machine. I can also, for example, check what version of core is running on that machine. I can also fetch the list of users. And let's assume for now, for example, that I don't have access yet to this server. I was brought in as a developer. I only have SSH credentials, but I don't have an account on the actual WordPress site to log into the site. So what I can do now is actually create a new user. So that would be WP user create. In general, the WP-CLI commands are always, they start with a noun and then a verb, except for the cases where they don't. But in general, that's the rule of thumb. User, for example, that's the noun we use here. That's one of the resources that we have. Just before we create the user, let me quickly give you a few hints of how you can discover the functionality of WP-CLI. So it comes with a built-in help system. So if I do --help after a given command, it tells me what the options are. So here in this case, for example, if I just do WP and then --help, I get a list of all the commands that are currently known to WP-CLI. And we can also see that we have the user command here that I wanted to use. So if I do WP user and then --help, I get a different help screen. Now it's the description of how the WP user command is to be used, and I see what sub-commands it has. The one I wanted to use was WP create, to create a new user. So again, I can do WP user create --help. Then I can see that WP user create has lots and lots of different arguments that I can provide. So it needs a user login, a user email. These are required. As you can see, there's no square brackets. The square brackets, they mean this is optional. So here there's lots of optional arguments that are also that I can provide. But if I don't want to try to remember everything like that, I can do the following. I can do WP user create and then --prompt. Prompt is a global parameter that should work everywhere, and it basically lets me go through the different arguments interactively. So now I can actually choose the different parameters that I want to provide in an interactive way. So I don't provide a password now. This is all optional. And I don't want to send an email. No. So now it created a new user. I will quickly head out just to change that password again because I want to avoid losing control over the server, as any password that is publicly displayed is at risk. So that is just a precaution to make sure I keep control over the server. And now if I do, I'm not in the right folder anymore. So this is, there we go. So if I now do WP user list, we can see that I added a user with the ID 3 that is an administrator. So now if I pull open my, I'm already logged in. Let me just quickly log out. So this is the site we're currently working on. And if I now want to log in, I can use the user I just created. Hopefully I remember the password. It was set, yes. So now I'm in the site. With a user I created without actually having a preset user before, just because when I'm running WP-CLI, I'm running it as basically the owner of the site. It's an administrator account per se. It can modify the database, it can modify the files, so it can create and remove even administrators. The important bit that you need to know is that when someone has access to WP-CLI, they have access to everything. They can create anything, they can destroy anything. So that's important to know. All right, so now we're in the site. That looks good. I'm going back to the terminal. So what I want to do now is try to get access to this site remotely through WP-CLI. So the way this usually works is that if you look at the help screen, at the end you can see that there's a global parameter that you can use called SSH. That allows you to do a remote connection to a connection to a remote server and then execute the WP-CLI tool that is already installed on that server and run commands against that version of WP-CLI. So in order for this to work, WP-CLI needs to be installed both on your local machine and on the server. So you can only remotely control servers where WP-CLI is already installed and you have the authorization to connect via SSH. If you take a closer look, you might notice here that this can also be used to connect to Docker machines or Vagrant machines. All right, so now let's try to connect via SSH. So basically what we need is the host, that is this one. Oh, sorry. That was not what I wanted. So, and then we need a port. This is the port for a SiteGround server here. And then we can provide the home folder. So hopefully that should normally be replaced. Now let me copy it from my script. So here we go. This is our home folder. Sorry for the very slow copy pasting. Okay, there we go. So now when I run a command against that, this should work. So you can see I used the local version of WP-CLI to connect to the remote machine and fetch the list of plugins from the remote machine. What I can do now is create an alias as a form of shortcut to connect to this machine. So I already prepared that. Basically what you can do is WP-CLI alias and then add this line. So this will add an alias. We can give it a name. So in this case, we added the alias sgw-prod for production server of the SiteGround webinar. And then basically our connection string that we already used in the SSH parameter that you see in here. So it's already added. We already have it in there. So you can see here that it's already in there. And the all alias, it's one that WP-CLI creates automatically. So this is the one that we created. So now if I do this, I can run commands remotely through an alias. So now I have a nice shortcut to run commands against this remote server. If I'm very lazy, I can even go further and use a shell alias to even make this shorter. Let's call it SGW. By the way, I will send a link with all the lines I'm typing here in my script file. I will send this out later so that everyone can copy paste this and go through everything again at their own leisure. So now I made this even shorter, and basically I now have a command to control my site.
So that's very useful for someone who's more advanced, who probably, for example, I already know that we had a number of questions in the Ask a Question section that I urge our watchers to use to ask questions about their specific websites and needs. But we already had a question. Is it something that can allow me to manage more than one website? So this is a great way that you could make a license from your own computer without having to log into each one of your websites, and you can actually manage a lot of them from a single location, right?
Yes, this goes even a step further. The alias list you see in here, it also accepts groups. So you can create a new group. For example, if I have an SGW prod and an SGW staging, I can create a group SGW, and then when I run a command against that group, it will run against all the sites that are contained in that group. So you can build a hierarchy, nested collections of sites where you can always send commands to a specific group of sites. And then, as I already said, there's the all alias that is already provided by WP-CLI that will run everything against all of the aliases. I can show how that looks. It will only run against one site now, but you see it first shows you which alias it uses and then gives you the result. So if you have multiple sites in a group, it will run them one after the other and always show you which alias it's currently working on, and then give you the result. Yeah, so that's a way to manage large groups of sites in one go, and this is only limited by the time and bandwidth you have. Basically, if you have 10,000 sites in there, it will slowly but surely run through all 10,000 of these sites if there's no technical issues in between.
Yeah, we at SiteGround very heavily use WP-CLI for a lot of actions. Actually, it has proven to be a tool that's very, very durable when it comes to handling huge amount of websites and data. So I don't think numbers are a problem here. It's just a matter of time to execute, and depending on the operation, of course, you want to do it.
Yes, exactly.
Let's show our viewers something else. How WP-CLI how you can use it to better troubleshoot a website, for example.
Okay, so to troubleshoot it, let's break it first. Then, so I'll head back into the server. That was the. So I already prepared a plugin here on this side, which right now, so before I'm changing something, so right now the plugin, it is active, as you can see here, but it actually does not do anything at all.
So you have created a simple empty plugin, so that we will use to break, right?
Yes. So now I'll uncomment the problematic line here. And now when I try to run something, there's an error. Also, when I now try to do something on the site, there's an error. So usually this means that you've locked yourself out of the site. You need to use FTP, change something, whatnot. So it's usually pretty bothersome to get control back from your site. And if you don't know what actual plugin is causing the issue, then oftentimes people start by deactivating everything, and then that can cause a lot of other issues. So oftentimes if you deactivate everything, you will have a lot of setup that you need to do later on again.
Let me pause just a second here. Why is a lot of people don't understand why disabling all scripts is a bad idea.
Yes. So if you deactivate all plugins, first of all, it can lead to buggy side effects, because the plugins they create the content model of the site, and for example, your theme might depend on that content model. And if some plugins disappear, all of a sudden the theme might request data that is not there, or worse, it might try to modify data that is not there. So that in the worst case, that can lead to database corruption. Also, if you do an actual deactivation of a plugin, some plugins have logic that will be executed upon deactivation. So just randomly deactivating plugins just to test something might actually delete some configuration settings or disable other things that you didn't want to disable, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and the plugin deactivation hook is triggered, and you don't know which other plugin is hooked to that, what actually happens as a bonus to the plugin deactivation.
So with WP-CLI, you have a different way that you can deal with this. So as we've seen right now, we can also not use WP-CLI, because WP-CLI, it executes the entire WordPress site before it does anything. And as the WordPress site does not load anymore, we immediately get an error. But WP-CLI has a method of skipping the loading of plugins. So that is not the same as disabling plugins. It just means that when WordPress is being loaded, it does omit to actually load the plugin files. But according to the database, for example, they are still active. The deactivation hook is not being triggered. So if we skip loading all the plugins, we get back functionality of our site again. And now we could, for example, try, okay, is it maybe WooCommerce that was problematic? No, it was not. But if we hit the proper plugin here, we notice that, okay, if we skip just this one plugin, then our site works. So that must be the culprit. And what we can actually do now is we can deactivate that plugin. However, if we try that, you will see we still have that error. So we still need to skip the plugins, or skip at least this specific plugin. And if we do that, now WP-CLI tells us that it has deactivated the plugin. Now we can see, yes, that worked. The plugin is now inactive, and we get back our site again. So if we reload the site, everything's fine again. All right, so what I had planned to do is show you how to mirror a site to a local machine, unless there's some other question I should answer first.
Yeah, we've been already we already went through the creation of a username, but what about resetting logins to a user that you have forgotten your password for?
Yes, so
another thing that we've been asked for.
If you look at the WP user command, it actually has a reset password command. And if we check the help for this, we need to type correctly. So it's basically WP user reset password, the user, and then we can choose whether the email should be sent or whether we want to skip sending the email notification. Normally, you want to send this notification, of course. And let's say it was the admin user. So we had 3 users on our site. Let's say it was the admin user, WP user reset password, and then we can either use the ID or the login.
Yes.
Usually the ID is the easiest, it's shortest to type, but both work. And now the admin user will have a reset password email that was sent to this email, and they can just click on that link and then choose a new password. So in this way, you can easily trigger this mechanism for other people. If they don't know how to do that themselves, they will just get an email and they can take it from there. There's the usual explanations from WordPress then that help them achieve this.
That sounds really useful in those cases where you can lock yourself basically out of your website.
Yes.
Another thing that people ask us pretty often is how do you change the URL your website works for? That's something that let's say if people move it to a different folder, or if they go through HTTP to HTTPS, for example. Is this something that's easily doable with WP-CLI?
Yes, that's very easy to do. So WP-CLI has a command called search replace. So that's this one. It has a lot of arguments that allow you to adapt it to your specific site. But most of the time, you don't need, so for a simple site, you don't need much of that. So the basic syntax is WP search replace, and then whatever old URL you were using, and then the new URL. And for example, if we look at what the site URL is here, so we do a WPO option get site URL. We can see that here that the site URL currently uses HTTP. What is this? So if we do search replace and we do HTTP .com, to be safe with shell escaping, it's always a good idea to put it into quotes. And then we do the same with HTTPS. Make sure you don't have typos in there. Let's verify. Yeah.
Especially when changing the URL, it's a good idea not to have typos.
Yes. Before we do this, what we can do is do a dry run if we're unsure. So dry run means it checks what it would replace, but it actually doesn't make any changes to the database. So if we do a dry one, we can see it would have made 25 replacements. And we can see 21 are in the global unique identifiers table, 2 are in the post content, 2 in the option values. Oftentimes people don't change this one. So there's an option for that. If you look back at the help, usually that's the skip columns. There we go. So that would be skip columns, if I remember correctly. So then we still have 4 replacements to be made. And if we now go ahead and do this.
Before you do this, it's always a good idea to make a backup of your database first.
Yes, you're perfectly right. So to make a database backup, there's a group of functions under WPDB. So you have check, clean, etc., etc. There's also export and import. And the export is the one that lets you do the backup, and import is for restore. So what we can do now is do a WPDB export. If you do, let's do help first. If you do, if you use the dash, it will output it to standard out. So if you want to look at it, for example, we can do it like this. So we send it to standard out, but we pipe it into cat so that it is paginated. Okay, that didn't work. I'm not on my own machine, so the cat obviously doesn't work like mine. But yeah, you get the gist. So you can see what it would generate. If we just do WPDB export, it has a pretty smart default where it generates a file name that both contains the site name and the date, and also a random hash for security purposes, so that no one can guess the actual file name from outside. So now you can see it exported it to, this is the database name, this is the date, and this is a random hash, so that the file name cannot be guessed.
So let's do the search replace now. I have deleted the certificate for that website, so it should replace it, but it should break, so we can restore after that.
Okay, so do I have the command still here? Yes. So I remove the dry run here. So we made 4 replacements. If we do WP option get site URL, for example, now, you can see that it includes the HTTPS. If we go to the site, let's find out what it does. So now it defaults to HTTPS, but we get a certificate error.
Yeah, so let's restore it back to what we did before. Yes, from the backup we have to generate.
If we look in our folder, we still have the backup that we generated. So it's just a matter of doing WPDB import in that file name. Now let's verify. We're back at.
By the way, autocomplete works too. That's something very useful. So if you can on SiteGround, and it's a different. I think it was an extra thing added to WP-CLI. You can just tab and it will autocomplete.
Yes.
The next command.
Yes, there's also in the installation documentation, there's also the steps are explained on how to set this up. So what Hester is referring to is if I want to type WP option, for example, I can type WPO and use the tab key, and it automatically completes it to option, because that's the only thing that starts with an O.
That's useful because sometimes it's singular, sometimes it's plural, like plugins list, like team list, and activate, and that sort of thing. This way you can't make a typo.
If you work a lot in the terminal, you're pretty much used to use the tab key a lot. For example, also here you notice that I didn't actually type the file name. And so if this auto-completion is also installed for WPCLI, it's just natural extension. It makes it work for everything.
Yes.
All right. Now we verified that that was not the right window. This one.
So basically, so far we've learned how to add a username, how to reset your logins, how to link to multiple different accounts and websites, how to do a troubleshooting of your website without disabling each and every plugin you have installed and active there, how to create a backup your database and how to restore from a backup. So
Yes.
is there anything else you want to show us, or we could hit the question section?
So I had still on my list changing name of sites. So I had I planned to do a mirror of the remote site to the local site and then changing it, but that's more for developers. So I don't know how many of the people in the audience are developers. So maybe it might make more sense to go through the questions and
okay, let's leave
what is most popular.
Let's leave that for an advanced session that we could do for more developers.
Should we quickly go through the spam, because it also shows a nice feature of how to.
That's another great feature. You can clean up spam with WP-CLI.
Yeah. So first of all, let's generate spam first, because we don't yet have something to clean there. So let's show how that works. Comment is resourced like many others that you can control. And of course, we have delete here, or spam to mark it as spam, trash, etc. But there's also generate. So first of all, we generate spam comments. I quickly copy my... so I'll explain this now. So basically what we're doing here is we generate comments, 3 of them. We get back the IDs. And then for each of the IDs, we mark them as spam. So that's the first step. So now we have 3 comments, and the 3 comments we marked as spam. If we do WP comment list, we only see the standard comment that is normally in there. But if we do comment list, that is spam, because they are hidden by default. Now we can see the 3 spam comments. And this WP comment list is important. This shows a very important feature of WPCLI. Usually most of these commands, they let you choose the format to work with. And a lot of times a format that is very useful is the IDs. Here you can see it just gives us the IDs of the spam comments. So the format basically lets you choose how to receive the output. You can, for example, receive it as JSON if you want to send it to a server for processing or so. But in this case, the IDs is actually what we need. And we can now wrap this. So basically, these are our IDs that we want to delete. And now we just do WP comment delete. So for all of these IDs of the spam comments, we send them to comment delete. And if we do this, you can see we deleted all of them in one go.
That's really useful. One more thing. One of the most beautiful things about WP-CLI is the ability that you can link different commands in a simple script. While we've been talking, I've actually created a super simple script. You can check it. It's in the same folder. So can you tell our users more about this and how simple and easy it is to do scripts like this? For example, this is something that will optimize your database, and then we'll do a daily backup SQL file that does that. But you can then link this to, let's say, a cron job and execute this on a daily basis. And,
So this is a bash script, so shell script. And basically, a script is nothing more than a text file that you can run through your shell so that it executes that script file one line at a time. The first line, it's a bit special. This is called a shebang. It starts with these two signs. So this is the sign for a comment. And if you do a comment with an apostrophe in the first line of a script file, this is called a shebang, and it lets the script, it lets the shell know with which application to execute the script. So in this case, it's a bash script. So the shell will use bash to execute what comes after this line. And then a script file, it's basically just anything you can type in here that does something. You can paste it in such a script file and it will do it in the script file. Only you can group multiple operations in such a way and have them under the name of the script so that you can execute it very simply. So for example, normally you can execute such a script by running it through the shell, which will do this. But you might have noticed that this is shown green because Risto already seems to have marked it as, no, it's not executable. So let's do this.
Yeah, it's executable only by owner. 700.
Am I looking in the wrong line? Ah, yeah, here. Yes, I'm looking in the wrong line. Yes. So this X bit means that it is executable. That's why it's shown in green. And this means you can even just run it like this. So you don't need to provide any application to run it. You can run it directly. As I already said in the beginning, I usually have a bin folder in my home folder where I put executable things in there, and you can actually store scripts in there. So your bin folder, we don't have one here. Let's see whether it is in the path. So you can see here, this is often, for most systems, the bin folder in the user's home is already in the path. So if we create it and then move our sample script in there. Oh, that's one space too many. I probably renamed it now. No. Sample script. All right, so now you can see it's gone here, but as it is now in the path, we can just run it like this. We don't need to know where it is.
Because you don't have to, if you're executing it from something else, you don't have to type in the path to the script every time.
Yes, and it basically means that this is a very easy way to build your own applications to make your life easier, to automate anything you can think about. Anything that can be solved through WP-CLI or through some other shell tools, put them in the script, make them executable in that way, and you can then slowly grow your own custom-made suite of specifically tailored tools that help you solve your specific use cases.
Okay, that was awesome. Let's hit the questions. We have something like 50 questions, and I want to go. Yes, it seems like we've wandered a bit into more advanced stuff. I will read every question, and so we have it on the recording. And this is something that's this is actually our first question. Will there be a replay? This is going to be live at an awkward time for me. Yes, there's going to be a replay. I'm sorry if some of you have experienced issues with the streaming. The replay will be provided in the highest possible definition that Crowdcast support. So we will share it to you over an email after the webinar. And I think tomorrow it will be updated on our YouTube channel. So I hope this answers your question. Now, the second question is, again, will you be sharing a list of commands that talked? I think Alain already answer to that, he will share a list of all the commands that we have used, the examples, so you don't. Yeah, I know it's difficult to remember commands, and none of you should do it anyway. So it's okay. We're gonna share everything that we've been doing. Okay, another question I really liked a lot. It was from the chat section. Is it compatible with WordPress multi-site?
Yes, it is. So first of all, if you look at the list of commands, you will see that there's actually a network command in here to provide network-wide operations. And there's a site command to work on sites. So if we look at the network, you can see that we can manage network meta through this. So this is, for example, important to manage the super admins. And if we look at the site subcommand, we can see that we have all sorts of ways that we can manage the sites. And one more thing is, if we look at WP Core, it has multisite convert and multisite install to either convert a single site into a multisite or start immediately with a multisite from the start. So WPCLI fully supports multisite. If you're working on a multisite, you need to be aware that some of the functionality needs to be adapted. For example, the search replace that we talked about earlier. When you do search replace, you need to define, should this work on the entire network or only the current site? Do we work with tables with a given prefix or with all tables and so on and so forth? For all the operations, you need to decide whether they should be acted upon for the entire network or for a given subsite. Or if you do want to activate a plugin, for example, of course, you can decide whether you want to activate it for the network or only for the currently active site. And one important detail is, by default, when you run a command, when you I don't know, check the active theme, for example, on a multi-site install, that's not list. On a multi-site install, this will act on the first site, the site that is set as the main site. If you want to use another site, the way to do that with WPCLI is that you provide a URL. So you would say HTTPS my subdomain dot what was it? Something like this, I think. So by giving a URL to WPCLI, it will hand over this URL to WordPress, so that WordPress can decide through its internal mechanisms what subsite this would actually hit. And then everything will be executed against that subsite. So even if you have very complex Sunrise scripts to do custom domain mapping or so on, you can still just use WPCLI as normal. Just remember to always provide the specific URL you want to work on.
So another question by Darren. Does this make WordPress more vulnerable to hacking? Any security tips? Do you need to worry that there's something that can run commands on your WordPress website without having an admin account, for example?
No, it's rather the opposite. Oftentimes, people use plugins to do all sorts of management work, and the plugins, they run in front-end web requests. So if the plugins contain any security vulnerabilities or just use weak mechanisms for authentication or something, then those are always very very real security vulnerabilities. With WPCLI, it is just one of the many tools that run on the server as a server account. So if you would have access to WPCLI, you could do very nefarious things with the site. But if you would have access to WPCLI, you would have access to the entire rest of the server. You would have direct access to the database. You would have direct access to the tools to install and delete applications and whatnot. So basically, everything that makes a server secure, and for example, all the precautions that SiteGround does to keep their server secure, this is also securing WPCLI. So if WPCLI would be vulnerable, it would be one of several hundred tools that would be vulnerable because the server is badly set up.
So to summarize, no, WP-CLI does not make your website vulnerable. If you're able to use it, this means that you already have enough access to it. Our next question is from Adnan. I really love to know more about profiling and optimizing sites using WP-CLI. Could you guys please upload that in the question? So I couldn't find the question, so I'm asking it right away.
Yes, I will quickly show how that can be used. So WP-CLI contains a package manager that you can use to install additional packages. And one of them is the profile command. So I do WP package install WP-CLI/profile command because that doesn't come bundled with the for. So the package manager now shows me that I have installed one additional command. And basically now if I do WP help, it will include a profile command. And the profile command, let me just quickly check the syntax. It basically lets you profile stages or hooks or random PHP execution to see what code paths they go through and how much time they take. So for example, if I do a profile stage all, so this is now a bit hard to read probably here on the video. I added the spotlight to eliminate all the 0 values. So now we can see with the current site, these are the hooks where something actually happens. Here you can see the time that is being spent in each of these stages. You can see how many database queries are being made. So for example, on init, we have 18 database queries that are being done. When the loop starts, we have 3 database queries, and so on. So this gives you a quick overview over what happens behind the scenes. And you can also profile a given hook, like, for example, let me try. So this is the init hook. Again, with the same, let me add the spotlight again to eliminate 0 values. There you go. Now we can see, for example, that WP Forms logging, it uses 1 database query. So here we can see what happens behind the scenes of the WordPress site. And of course, you can now use the URL parameter for any sub URL. You can run these profiling steps.
Yeah, I think that pretty much answers the question. It's WP-CLI is really useful in those cases when you have one of your plugins doing something heavier than the others, and you're not really sure which one of it. So the way Alain showed it to you is a very useful way to figure out at which step you get your time slowing down, and then seeing which are the plugins or things in your added to your theme that actually link to that hook. And this is a very good way to figure out which part of what is slowing your website down. So I really hope that this answers your question and will help you out figure what is wrong with a slow site next time you work on one. Another question is, are there any scripts that would make both changes easier for multiple websites hosted on SiteGround? No, we haven't done any custom functions about that. We, however, and I think that this is something that's do. I will share my screen too. I hope you managed to see it too. Here is my screen, and each plugin developer can add their own commands. So, for example, we have added the SG command to WP-CLI. So you can command our SG optimizer plugin, and you can do things like WP-SG purge if you want to clear your browser cache. You can do things like enable certain optimizations that we have, like this literally enabled the gzip compression for your website. You can see the proper rules added. I disabled it actually. Now there's the rules for gzip. You can disable that. And a lot of stuff like this. You can do, for example, WooCommerce has a list of comments that they register. So if you're a plugin developer, you should always do the WP-CLI support to make the life of people using it easier. And if you're using a plugin on a daily basis, like especially a bigger one like WooCommerce, for example, make sure you check. They have a lot of extra comments written specifically for their plugin. Next question is for with WP-CLI, is it possible to eliminate residues left by the plugins that were already detected and deleted and leave a reference in the autoload in options? If so, how?
The main issue with that is that, yes, you can remove anything you want with WP-CLI, but there's no way to detect what is a residue of a deleted plugin or not, because WordPress does not keep track of anything like that, and we don't have a database of known information about all the plugins specifically for WP-CLI either. So that's just one of the main drawbacks of the way the database is being managed by WordPress. It basically means that with time, you just collect more and more rubbish inside of your database. And the only way to get rid of it is really go through it manually. When you know what you're doing, you know what the usual culprits are and what you can probably remove. Make a backup first, because still, even if you know what you're doing, it's very easy to remove something that was still being needed.
Yeah, Jesse always in the command just suggested that you could grab for the plugin prefix, but that's of course if they're using one, right? So
yeah, but that's also dangerous because, for example, for well-known plugins, other plugins tend to hook into their ecosystem and then use their functionality even if that plugin is gone already. So that might break other plugins that seem unrelated but just happen to use what was already there in terms of naming and in terms of content model.
But we can easily delete things like expired transients, right? For example.
Yes, that's actually very easy to do. I can maybe quickly show that. Let me share my screen again. Am I live?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, we have a command called transient, and it lets you list all the transients, set them, get them, but also delete them. So if we do a list now, we'll probably find out that we already have some, even though this is a completely fresh site. getting anything here.
Or probably that list is a bit big.
That should normally immediately start with the output. Don't know what's happening now. Well, of course, that's the demonstration effect. Let's just delete them anyway. So usually with transients, you can opt to delete all of them, or you can opt to only delete the expired. Usually expired should be very safe, and all should still be safe, because transients are meant to be not required. So if you need to persist something, you don't use transients. Transients are only for stuff that can at any point vanish in the database. However, keep in mind that usually transients are used for caching, and if you completely flush all your caches on a high traffic site, that can lead to other performance issues, because when the caches are being rebuilt, you can hit something like cache stampede or so. So be wary that even though transients are meant to be deleted in a safe way, it can lead to trouble on high traffic sites.
What about the WP cache command? Somebody mentioned it in the comment section already.
Yes, WP cache command lets you control the cache abstraction that WordPress provides. So, for example, if you have something like memcached installed on your server.
Yes, we do have memcached on SiteGround. You can actually enable it, or I can do this for you.
Normally, we can deduce the type. So right now, there's no specific cache active. This is all done through the abstraction that WordPress has put in place, and it's basically just a means of a CRUD interface to interact with that cache. So you can set values, change them, flush the cache, and so forth.
Yeah, probably flushing the cache would be the most useful one.
Yes, that would just be WP cache flush, and this now just tells you that WPCLI has sent the flush request to the abstraction. What actually happens behind the scenes depends on how your server is set up.
Yes. Right now we have memcached enabled for that website. I just enabled it, but that doesn't.
Yeah, now it shows up.
Yes, I just, while we were speaking, I just typed WP-SG memcached enable, and that told our SG optimizer plugin to put an object cache PHP file in the WP content folder, which literally enabled linked WordPress to the memcached service. So
yes, awesome. Now you can see we can actually verify this with WP cache type. So WordPress knows about memcache now, and WPCLI can deduce that type. So that's a way to verify that your object cache is actually active.
Now you can check it again, because I have just disabled it. And now it's default.
Now we're back to default.
That's a good way to actually see, because object cache is a bit tricky for people to figure out. It's not like full page caching. It's kind of more difficult to diagnose, and most people can't tell if it's actually working or not.
Yes.
Okay, let's answer another question. Oh, that's a very good one. Is search replace taking care of serialized data?
Search replace takes care of serialized data, although with a caveat. So generally, whenever strings are found in serialized data, search replace will properly replace them and adapt to serialized data, so that the indexes and the sizes are properly adapted. What it cannot always automatically figure out is if you have serialized objects in there and the properties of the objects contain a string that should be replaced. Because to be able to do that safely, the object would need to be deserialized, and there's not always a proper way to do that without knowing what that code actually is. So usually properties inside of serialized objects are not being replaced. But general strings and so on, the type of stuff that you have in the options table, for example, that will be probably replaced.
Thank you for that very detailed answer to that question. Let's answer a few more of those. Please keep the question and answer box only for questions. Again, I'm sorry if you have experienced issues with the connectivity. We will provide a HD recording of this webinar and a full list of the commands, because really a lot of people have asked this. Another question, SS keys needed to be created first before using. I guess this is more of a basic how to connect to SSH. At SiteGround, for security reasons, we allow only to connect only with SSH keys. So if you are linking the way Alain showed you from your local WP-CLI environment, you need to have your SSH key added to your SiteGround account, and then add it to your local environment and enabled with SSH add. Another thing, another good question. Any Gutenberg-related functionality?
So right now we only have a few small things, like for example the scaffold command. That is a command that you can use to quickly create a starter code. And this command actually has a scaffold block. So it lets you scaffold a basic Gutenberg block. You provide it with a slug, title, icon, and so on. And then it will create that block. It can immediately be used. You will see it in Gutenberg being active, and you can then hack away at it, modify it. However, we're still discussing on how best to adapt this further, because right now this does not come with a build pipeline. So it's just old style vanilla JavaScript and CSS, nothing fancy, no Webpack or something like that. So it's very old school still. We want to have more advanced ways of scaffolding later on, but there's still a few design decisions that need to be made, and it's basically waiting for code to distill what the actual best practices should be, because it's still a very volatile space, and it's very hard to find out what the long-term best practice to create blocks will actually happen to be.
Another question from Charles Barnett. Is there a way to delete old posts through WP-CLI? Like, I would like to delete all posts older than 30 days. Is this something doable?
Yes, this is doable. However, I will probably now fail to show it because so generally, if you want to delete something, you need IDs, and IDs you always retrieve them through the list command, as I showed with the comments. So basically, your starting point would be WP post list, and you use format IDs to get the IDs, and then you wrap that in a substitution and do WP post delete. So here you will be able to provide parameters to decide which IDs to retrieve. So if you do WP post list, the syntax is a bit very vague here. This one denotes that you can use any field with any value, and there's a note here, display post based on all arguments supported by WP-Query. So basically, any way that WP-Query provides to filter posts, you can use it in WP post list to filter your posts and then pass that on to the WP post delete. And that will probably be something like WP post list date in or date before. I don't know the WP query arguments off the top of my head. But
Yeah,
basically,
actually,
yes.
Yep, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
Actually, WP-CLI is probably one of the best documented projects, WordPress and related to WordPress. So I would recommend that you check the WP the WPCLI.org website. It has been shared multiple times in the comments in the chat section too. I think Francesco will share it for you once more. And it's one of the projects that really has great implementation. So it's something that is very broadly used for things that may make sense just for you or your website, or you have something very particular. So I would recommend you to check out the website, and if you have any particular strange thing to look after, yeah, I'm pretty sure you'll find answer for that. And another very, very good way of communication is actually through the WordPress chat. WordPress is on Slack, and you can join the CLI channel at the official WordPress.org Slack, which is basically the WP-CLI development channel. I think we have time for one more question. And I really like the one asked from Rafael, how to disable a plugin autoload in options via WP-CLI.
Plugin autoload?
Yes.
I don't really understand the question. Option autoload, or?
I believe he's talking about option autoload.
So normally that would be WP option update, I think. And here, if you do update, there's an autoload parameter you can set. So you can set it to yes or no. So basically, if you have a key that is being autoloaded and you want to stop it from autoloading, you do WP option update that key, and then autoload equals no. And that should disable it. I hope that was the question, because I don't know what plugin autoload would be. I'm not getting any sound anymore.
Sorry for that. I have muted my mic until you were speaking. Yeah, I would say thank you for answering so many questions and for bringing our viewers so much useful information. I really hope that everybody finds something useful for this, and we should do this more often.
Yes.
So thank you very much. I will try to answer all your questions later on in a blog post that will and over social media, and where we will share an HD recording of this webinar. Thank you very much, and have a great evening, day, or morning, depending on where you're at.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.